Mark Sullivan had always tried to get along with his mother-in-law, Patricia, but the relationship was often strained. Patricia was a proud, traditional woman who believed in hospitality, but also had her favorites. Mark had learned early on that he wasn't exactly at the top of that list. It all came to a head one Sunday afternoon. Patricia invited the family over for a barbecue. Mark's wife, Lisa, and their children were excited, chatting about the food and desserts. Mark, however, felt a familiar knot of anxiety. As everyone gathered around the table, Mark noticed something immediately. Plates were being handed out, each piled with perfectly cooked steaks, and accompanied by a generous helping of sides and desserts. Everyone's laughter filled the backyard, everyone except him. Mark looked down at his empty hands, then at Patricia. She was smiling, directing conversation toward the guests. "Oh, Mark, you don't need anything yet. You'll eat later," she said, a little too casually. Mark's cheeks warmed, a mix of embarrassment and frustration rising. He tried to shrug it off, focusing on his kids, who were happily chatting with their cousins. But it hurt. Everyone had food, everyone was enjoying themselves, and he was being excluded for no clear reason. Hours passed, and finally, Patricia came over, holding a plate. Mark braced himself, thinking she was finally going to serve him. But then she paused and looked at him with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Mark," she said slowly, "you've waited long enough. But I think it's time to show everyone what a real steak is like." Before he could react, she led him to a separate table in the backyard, away from the crowd. There, under a small tent, was an entirely different spread, prime cuts of steak, seasoned perfectly, and an array of desserts that looked like they belonged in a five-star restaurant. Mark's jaw dropped. "This is all for me?" Patricia nodded. "Yes. Everyone else got the regular stuff, but you, well, I wanted to give you the best. You've been polite, kind, and patient, even when you were excluded. I think you deserve something special." Mark laughed in disbelief, a mix of relief and joy washing over him. He felt a surge of gratitude toward Patricia, realizing that her actions had been intentional all along. She had been testing him, watching how he handled the situation, and rewarding him for his patience. Lisa came over smiling. "See, Mark? Mom knows exactly what she's doing." Mark shook his head, still amazed. "I can't believe this. All that time, I thought she didn't like me." Patricia laughed warmly. "I wanted to see your reaction. You didn't complain, didn't act bitter. You stayed gracious. That says more about you than any steak ever could." Mark sat down, savoring the food. Each bite seemed richer, because it wasn't just a meal. It was a statement, a lesson in patience, and a recognition of his character. By the end of the afternoon, the dynamic had completely changed. Guests who had noticed his exclusion earlier now watched him with curiosity, and Patricia made a point of explaining why he had received the special treatment. Everyone understood that it wasn't about favoritism. It was about respect, patience, and integrity. Mark realized something profound. Sometimes being overlooked isn't a slight. It's an opportunity. Patricia had tested him, and he had passed, showing that his character mattered more than being the first to get a plate. Later that evening, as the family cleaned up and shared laughter over coffee, Mark felt a newfound sense of belonging. Patricia had taught him a quiet lesson. True recognition often comes not from being noticed first, but from being patient, gracious, and kind when it matters most. As he left the house that night, Mark looked back at the glowing backyard, smiling. The steaks and desserts had been incredible, but the real reward had been respect and understanding, the kind that no ordinary meal could ever provide.